Welcome back to our final segment of Radio Row. With us are Debbie Callan from WMGK, Mike Vasilikos from WXPN, and Paul Perillo from CBS Radio. So we have a big question here. It's a little open-ended. So we have three representatives here from three pretty different types of radio companies. So we've got MGK, which is owned by Beasley Media, XPN, which is a AAA station funded by Penn, and then CBS Radio, which is a powerhouse. They're one of the big six that own 90% of all media, CBS. So we're curious about, like, A, the pros and cons of working for a big company versus a smaller company. What's the difference when you moved around from those different types of companies, and just your general experiences and just that kind of things.
Well, a big company, usually there's more money to work with for promotions. You know, you can take things up a notch. We were recently, well, about a year ago, I guess, we had been a Greater Media owned station for many years. That's when I first came into MGK in whatever year it was, 94. Greater Media owned the radio station, and so Beasley coming in, we were all, what is this going to mean for us? What kind of changes is this going to be? And Greater Media, family-owned station, Beasley, a family-owned station too, but they're different. They're very different. We had to readjust our thoughts. We had in the shift between companies, there were a lot of people. You touched on something earlier about people being let go, because cost effective, and for the sale to go forward, that had to happen. It had absolutely nothing to do with the jobs that the people were doing. It was just a bottom line cost, saving measure. So that was kind of hard entering into a relationship with a new company, with seeing some of your, coworkers leave like that. But we've adjusted. Again, a bigger company, and I don't know that Beasley necessarily, I don't know, right off the top of my head how many stations they own. There's money there, but again, they're a little bit more cautious about spending. But if you have a good argument for a promotion that's going to require a lot of money, right now we're doing a contest where $1,000 is given away 5 times a day. It's a company-wide contest, but we never have access to that kind of money to give away unless, we had a big company, and we were also doing it in conjunction with the other stations under the Beasley banner. So there's one instance.
Entercom is doing the same thing. Entercom now owns CBS, so they're doing the same type of bends on the tens, where on our sister station, KYW, at 10 minutes past the hour, you could call in, but it's a nationwide contest. So, KY and all the CBS stations are participating. It gives the listener the impression that I may have a chance to win by listening to KYW, but so may the people that are listening to the Entercom stations in San Francisco and Washington and, Tallahassee, wherever those stations are. So, things I find are a little slower to take effect, or if you have an idea, they entertain the idea, but when you're independently owned, like More FM, WBEB, it's an independently owned radio station. They are consistently in their number 1 and number 2 stations, but even they are, to get a promotion approved or to do a remote broadcast, it takes a little bit more time and effort and thought that goes into it before maybe somebody would just jump on the gun when there wasn't really this fierce competition to get, to be out in front with things. I think it takes a little more time to get things done today.
WXPN is sort of a different radio station in regards to some of these things. We're licensed to Penn. We're funded by our listeners. Over half of our budget comes from people actually picking up a phone and calling and donating $10 a month or $20 a month. So the nice thing is we're beholden to those listeners. Those listeners tell us they want new music and deep cuts, and we have the freedom to play all that stuff because we're beholden to them. I wouldn't quite call it a negative, but we don't have that financial, we don't have, the money is not there in the same sense of a commercial radio station. People don't want to donate $100 a year and have you spend it on a billboard. They want it to go back into the programming and back into that service that we're providing to them. So in terms of marketing and promotion, there's not necessarily as much money as a commercial radio station would have, but we have to get creative with the things that we do. You know, we put on a 3-day festival every summer, and it's one of our biggest events, but it's also one of our biggest marketing tools to be over in Camden on the water for 3 days and to promote it, and creative collaborations with commercial entities and other, you know, community projects. You know, it's a different, we're a different type of station. The advantages and disadvantages of it are kind of, you know, are unique to us in some ways, but there's a lot of flexibility on the programming end, on the business end. It's a little different.
One other circumstance that has changed with us at MGK from going from Greater Media to Beasley, that was a privately owned company, and now we're publicly owned, so we have to think about shareholders too. So the bottom line sometimes shifts, and that definitely shifts in that scenario.
That's interesting.
Now, also going back to just playing on the diversity, the peer diversity that we have here, audiences. Now, that's been a topic, I think, in recent media kind of conversations. It can really be segmented. I think audiences now, and definitely in terms of news, I think in music as well, again, playing on the Spotify, Apple Music, other music vendors, things like that. How does that affect kind of that audience specificity affect maybe some stations that, you know, if you're trying to branch out, will that, you know, negatively deter audiences from coming to listening to the station, or does that affect you guys in any sort of way?
Well, most stations have a target audience in mind. In the case of MGK, we're adults 25 to 54. However, we find that we have a lot on the younger end, you know, 18 to 49. There's all these little categories when you break down the ratings, and then up to 65. So, but that's our core. That's where we try to get our most listenership, a balance of men and women. And so the music that we play goes to that segment for the most part. Also, as classic rock evolves, I think the standard is like 25 years it has to be out. So now you've got Guns N' Roses, you got Pearl Jam, you got, you know, all these different bands, and some of the 60s stuff sort of goes out. So your music evolves to also keep your audience evolving as well.
Yeah, I think at one time back in the day, there have always been radio formats from day one, but back in radios, perhaps if there was a golden era, everybody wanted to be number one with everybody. So we tried to be a full service station. You wanted to give them everything you possibly could because you wanted to be the number one in every category. Well, as ratings have changed and the way ratings are done, it seems to me that, you know, if you want to be number one with 12 plus, like in the case of maybe WIOQ, you could do that. You could call yourself number one amongst 12 plus. But, you know, then you have, you know, the Radio 1 group, which caters to the African American minority communities. So I think today radio stations have gotten away from wanting to be number one in every category, and now, as Debbie said, they have targeted the demographic as to what they want, you know, who they want to serve. You know, WIP, Sports Talk, you know, they did Boffo at the box office with the Eagle season that just concluded with the Super Bowl. So they shot up to number one in the ratings because everybody was listening to the games on WIP. KYW is another station. You know, these are all CBS Entercom stations now. You know, KYW is sort of still trying to be a little bit to everybody, and I think they're starting to see their listenership sort of fade away and erode a little bit, because you can't have, on a station that is skewing to an older demographic, talk about the Twitter report, because most people listening to KYW are like, hey Mary, what's this Twitter thing all about? They're not getting it, you know. And younger people, like everybody here, you're not listening to KYW, not even for school closing numbers anymore, because they're delivered directly to your phone. So in that case, they really got to figure out how they're going to move forward. They may not necessarily be the big behemoth to everybody. They may have to sort of fine tune where they want to go.
For XPN, I'm not going to lie, we look at numbers, we look at those age demographics and stuff like that, and they're very important to us. A lot of that, those measurements are used for sales, and because we're so dependent on members and people calling, it's a little bit of a different dynamic for us. We have 30,000 people that are members of the radio station. For us, moving that number up is really the most important thing. Our music is wacky, you know what I mean? Like, we play a lot of new music, but that doesn't necessarily mean we have a younger demographic.
Yes,
there are a lot of young people that listen to the radio station, but you may see our age actually tend to be a bit older. And the other thing is, they love the 70s. For some reason,
Yes,
the music of the 70s
decade.
wins more than any other decade.
Yeah.
Yeah, I listened to this, Joe, and it definitely, I can confirm that, yeah. It's
I
all
remember
good, though.
hearing Dire Straits on your station. So, do your interests as an individual, being just as a person, a radio host, a reporter, and the company that employs you, does it always seem to link up? And if it doesn't, how do you pick your battles without, well, getting canned?
Wow, who wants to take that one?
It's a delicate line that you got to, in the case of WPHT, it's a conservative talk radio station. So back in the day, I, as a journalist, came up through LaSalle knowing that we had to present a fair and a balanced, unbiased newscast. You had to present both sides of the story. Well, that's not necessarily the case these days, because if you're working on a conservative talk station, you sort of will skew your stories or pick and choose the stories that are pretty much going to support that mission of the radio station. So in the case of the current administration with President Trump, you're not necessarily going to highlight a story that's negative about the president, but you're going to lead with something that perhaps is positive. In the case of the whole, his attorney being they went into his office, took his records and all the other stuff. You got it. In true journalistic fashion, you have to report the story. But then you get other radio stations that will highlight that as the big story of the day, when we would probably include that story, but it wouldn't necessarily be the big story of the day. There might be something that's going on locally that perhaps takes a little more precedence over that. So you're in this constant battle between what do we go with, what do we not go with, where do we put this story as opposed to that story. And so it's a little more challenging today to toe the mission of the radio station, at least with talk radio, as opposed to presenting a fair and balanced newscast.
I've been very lucky to have good program directors at MGK who, although I know our consistency is definitely at the core of everything that we do, music-wise and just presentation. However, in the case of something, for instance, when Tom Petty died, threw us all off, and so you're going to change your programming. I mean, Mike certainly can say that. You're going to adapt to what is going on. How far are you going to take it? You can push that, sometimes I have had to push with my program director saying I'd like to take it a little bit further, or I'd like to introduce this element. And again, you're always aware it's a commercial radio station and not everybody feels the same way that you do. But I feel personally that if I have a good case to argue, I can go in and I'll be listened to.
Yeah, it's funny. Some hosts need encouragement to sort of push the envelope a little bit. Some you need to rein them in a little bit. Everybody's different. Personally, I'm pretty lucky too. XPN is very sort of open-minded to different ideas. We have a music meeting every week. We have 4 people in there, but anybody can really submit ideas on the staff. If you hear something that you really like that you think is cool, we're really open. I mean, we get hundreds of CDs every week still, and we go through everything, we listen through everything. So people have ideas, they throw them on the board. I mean, you just kind of have to be mature about it. Not everything that you throw on the table is going to be on the air the next day. But it's a pretty collaborative workspace. So.
And you work on air and off air, so you get to play double agent a little bit, right?
I'm sort of, I'll use some sports analogies. I'm like the utility infielder in baseball, or like a sixth man in basketball whenever somebody's sick or out or what, that kind of thing. I'm the guy who pops in, and I host a new music show. So yeah, I do a lot. I like the behind the scenes stuff too. I really do. I like seeing everything, like constructing it and watching it happen. But being on the air is a ton of fun.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Well, our time here is coming to a close, but I wanted to leave off with one question, and that is, we've heard a lot, but that is, last question is, what does the future of the radio industry look like? There's a lot of, as we've talked about, there's a lot of different outlets, a lot of technologies, a lot of different developing, things going on in the industry. What do you think it looks like, it's going to look like in 10, 20, 30 years from now?
If I can insert something, and then with this latest net neutrality decision, do you think that'll play a factor in radio, either good or bad? You can't stream it, or they're most likely to listen to it terrestrially. So that's a lot to handle in a couple minutes, but I just wanted to.
Yeah, I would say it's limitless. I mean, I think you could set your sights, and really there are probably more opportunities today for radio to thrive and survive than ever before. They have written the obituary for radio since the 1940s.
Yeah, absolutely.
FM arrived, AM was dead.
Yep.
Television arrived, AM and FM was dead. Cable came. So I think all of those naysayers that say it's a dinosaur, it's an antique. So I mean, one thing I would stress is to stay on top of what's going on in the business. You mentioned net neutrality. If a student or someone watching this doesn't know what net neutrality is, then I don't know how you can really move forward with even understanding what's going on in this industry. So you really have to stay on top of everything. But I think really the future is promising. It's limitless for radio.
Great.
I agree.
Yeah, to what Debbie mentioned earlier, embracing some of these new technologies and stuff like that. We might not be turning a dial like we did for a lot of years. We may be pushing buttons or saying, play WMGK, but I think radio can still can absolutely prosper. Yeah.
Well, that's a great note to end on.
Yeah.
We want to thank all three of you for coming out. We really appreciate you, spending your time with us. I want to thank Tanya Ellis for helping us do all this, the crew who volunteered their time, and of course our studio audience who was nice enough to insert some questions. So that's it for Radio Row, and be sure to check all these guys out on social media, and have a great day.
Don't forget to listen to WEXP too.
Thank you.
Can't be.